Good evening, everyone. Yes, this is when it is actually going to be starting, and I see that the people do have their coffee cups and water cups there. Welcome, bienvenue, and thank you everyone for coming to the Segal Center here at SFU Harbor Center. I want to begin today by acknowledging that we are on the privilege to be doing our work today on the unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. My name is Fred Popowich, and I'm the Scientific Director of SFU's Big Data Initiative. And on behalf of Simon Fraser University, I have the pleasure of welcoming you to our fall 2019 Data Visionaries series, a series dedicated to bringing together pioneers in the field who are shaping and reshaping the world we live in. And on that note, I'm just curious, before I continue here, how many people have been to one of our Data Visionaries events before? So a few hands here. See, there was a question saying, how many people actually, are all these the same people coming out for each event? No, we have a lot of different events and we get a lot of different people, so it's great to see everybody here today. So I encourage you to join in on our online conversation today over Twitter, as long as, I make sure that I've muted my 3G telephone there in terms of the old technology there. So you can use the hashtags, hashtag SFU and hashtag Data Visionaries. And in terms of that, moving forward, I have my notes weren't sticking here, which they are doing now. There we go. So there's a lot of buzz right now about 5G, and we're racing to roll out 5G technologies across Canada. And as you've heard, there's discussion about security, privacy, and the relationship between government and telecommunications companies. So 5G can propel smart city technologies that improve urban and rural life, but for many of us, the roadmap is still unclear. Today, we will explore the opportunities and risks of smart cities and its impact on Canadians. And SFU is pleased to introduce the following panelists. So right next to me here, Abu-Hakima is a co-founder and president and CEO of Amika Mobile Corporation, which is focused on public safety and security. She has a strong record for excellence and innovation. She has both a master's and PhD in AI and is a key inventor and innovator of 30 international patents related to AI. You've outdone me there. I only have 2 patents related to AI. We were talking the other day about the AI conferences we were at in the 80s and 90s, yes, back in the old days, yes, yeah. She has published more than 125 papers, received numerous awards, and has been vested with the Order of Ontario. She is a trailblazer and advocate when it comes to women's participation in the high-tech industry. Let's join in welcoming Sue. Next to Sue is my colleague just from down the hall at Simon Fraser University, Dr. Rodney Vaughan, who is a professor of electrical engineering at SFU and the Sierra Wireless Chair in Communications. His research focuses on innovation in electronic and communication product design, using signal processing theory, antenna theory, and design, and in wave propagation measurement and modeling, as related to the understanding of physical mechanisms that need signal processing solutions. Rodney has a bachelor's and master's degree in electrical engineering from the University of Canterbury in New Zealand, and a PhD in electrical engineering from Aalborg University in Denmark, and is a professor engineer certification from the Institute of Professional Engineers in New Zealand. Welcome, Rodney. And I apologize for my poor Danish. Yeah. At the far end here, we have Stefan Guignol, who is the Vice President of Communications Research Centre Canada's Applications and Performance Branch. He joined the organization in 2015, bringing over 20 years of experience in the telecommunications and semiconductor fields. Prior to joining CRC, he was Chief Operating Officer for POET Technologies. Earlier, he worked at Integrated Device Technology, formerly Tundra Semiconductor, Moderator, and Nortel. Yeah, I've heard of that company. I think I may have had shares in that. Bell Northern Research, that is, where he progressed through several systems design and management positions. Stéphane holds a BSc in computer engineering from Université Laval. Stéphane, welcome. So moving on to my notes here, which are stuck together, so I can remember, this is the last page where I'm familiar with what I'm doing here. So the way that we like to do this thing is, we've done these panels before, and what's really exciting about these panels is we get a range of perspectives, and you've already heard from the backgrounds of our speakers here what they're going to be, where they're coming from, and maybe they can help us figure out where we're going to, as I was saying, in terms of a roadmap. the way that we like to structure this is we have some questions sort of to structure some initial conversations prepared in advance, which I'm going to go through the panelists. And that'll be about for the first hour. And then after that, we open it up to questions from the audience. And in all my years of experience in a university, I know how to be really nasty when it comes off to cutting off people for questions. So we have a lot of people in here, so you'll be, if you're chosen, I will say ask one question, and we sometimes have time for follow-ups in that. But generally where the really good discussion comes is afterwards, because there's always more questions than we have time to address, and that's why we invite you afterwards to sit down and stand up and to mill about and to discuss the issues with each other and with the panelists. So to get things going, I thought we would allow everybody to briefly introduce themselves, so basically giving themselves a self-introduction, now that I've sort of given the high-level introduction to them, where everybody is going to be able to say a bit more maybe about their name and background if they would like to, and respond to the question, why does 5G matter? And we're going to start with Sue. So over to you, Sue.
Okay, so I think Fred gave me a great introduction. So not much more to say there. The only thing missing is that I am an entrepreneur, and I've been an entrepreneur for about 19 years. I've done 2 companies, successfully exited 1, and working on my second one in public safety and security. So that's important to know. With respect to 5G, what I think is interesting for us as Amika Mobile, we are working in the area of 5G. We are part of the Smart City Initiative in Ottawa, so we are doing actual trials right now. I do also sit on the Encore board, which is a 5G board, which we can get into later. With respect to 5G, what I find the most interesting thing about it is those of you that use LTE today or have your phones and use 4G, it's 100 times faster. 5G is 100 times faster than 4G. And so all of a sudden you're going to be able to, and it's not just about streaming your movies in 5 seconds or getting at that stuff really quickly, but really for me it's situational awareness. When there's a shooting, as there was on the weekend on Saturday, as the police were driving down in their connected vehicle, they would have had live streaming data and situational awareness of what was going on, what kind of shooting it was, because there would be a lot of cameras, and they'd have their information just as they arrive. So it's really getting more just-in-time information and helping save lives. So that's why I'm excited about 5G.
Thank you. Well, I just looking around and I noticed there's a very large cross-section of...
Hold the mic up.
Okay, is that better? I just looking around. Thank you for coming. It's a very big cross-section. There's young people and people my age and something in between. So I imagine the buzzwords like 5G mean a lot of different things to members of this audience. I don't quite know what it means. It started being thrown around, maybe 5 years ago. 1G and 2G weren't really called 1G and 2G at the time. It came later. But 5G, they decided that, we need things, you said 100 times. The words I had was 1,000 times, sort of bigger and better. So it's got to be this really big jump. But we've had this 1G, 2G, 3G, 4G, and they're just a slightly better version of the predecessor. So 5G is the current rage, and according to Qualcomm, who are one of the big pushers of the buzzword, they think it's anything that's new in radio or radar or anything associated with the signal processing devices, materials, et cetera, for the next 20 years. So we don't know what's coming up. Engineers are pretty bad at predicting how things are going to turn out. You'd have to talk to a true visionary, someone like Elon Musk or someone like that, to sort of have a really good guess at what's going to happen in the future, but it's almost unpredictable which way it's going. If we knew which way it was going to go, we'd buy stocks in the right areas and we wouldn't be doing this. Well, yeah, be an entrepreneur, get it right. My personal interest in stuff like this, I love spatial fields and waves, acoustics and radio waves. I find this incredibly fascinating, how these things come through the ether and become ones and zeros inside a phone or any other device. It's an extraordinary journey that a piece of or snippet of information has as it goes from one place to another. I'm very interested in this. What you see with things like AI is that it's talking mainly about ones and zeros, the digital stuff that goes on and the algorithms in the background and so on. But what you don't see is this information collection and dissemination process, which is a wonderful combination of physics and signal theory and things like that. I think I've talked enough, so I'll pass it on to you. Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. So Fred, in his introduction to me, and he kept me for last because there was not much to say. I'm so blessed to be with these two here. He mentioned that I was at a company called Tundra Semiconductor in west end of Ottawa in Canada, and we were acquired by a company called IDT, Integrated Device Technology, a San Jose company. And the reason they acquired this little company started by Terry Matthews in Ottawa was we had won 100% of the 4G design wins around the world. So every time you place an LTE call today, no matter where you are in the world, China, Japan, Korea, North America, I don't care, it goes through silicon that Tundra had done, and then IDT bought us, and they ramped the revenues through the roof. And I stayed part of that company for an extra 5 years. The reason I'm telling you this is we had won those designs 10 years ago. And how long have you been enjoying 4G and LTE, really? Not many years, right? A couple? Like 2-3 years? So it took them like 7 to 10 years to really maximize the speed of LTE. They're still deploying LTE systems, and now they're deploying LTE advanced systems. I work at the Communications Research Centre of Canada. It's a Government of Canada lab. We are part of what used to be called Industry Canada. Now we're called ISED for Innovation, Science, and Economic Development, right? So our sister groups downtown Ottawa, they license spectrum to the Bells, Telus, and Rogers. And once a year, we are privy to sit down with them and see and hear their deployment roadmaps. So they tell us, I can't tell you who, but they're still heavily deploying LTE systems out there. You might have heard of Cloud RAN or C-RAN, etc. That's the latest and greatest carrier aggregation. They can do hundreds of megabits per second download with 4G. I'm not talking about 5G yet, right? So it took them 7 to 10 years to deploy lots of capital expenditure in your neighborhoods, installing antennas, rolling trucks, etc. They're going to want to make money from that investment. So 5G will come, but gradually, right? And they'll start with dense urban areas where there's lots of people, like downtown Vancouver and the harbor here, downtown Toronto, downtown Montreal, and then they'll expand, right? So 5G will come. It won't be 100 times faster right off the box. It will be faster, incrementally faster, and over time you'll reap the benefits. At the government today, and I've joined 4 years ago, we are doing fundamental research in 5G with industry. We're trying to help people maximize the use of millimeter waves, like at 28 gigahertz, 60 gigahertz, etc. In the meantime, we're trying to maximize the use of the spectrum, the airwaves, below 6 gigahertz, which are the frequencies that we all love and use today on our cell phones, Wi-Fi at home, etc. We're trying to maximize using those frequencies. TV bands like TV white space, land mobile radio. So we're doing all kinds of work in these areas to maximize that natural resource that is the airwaves for Canadians and small, medium companies.
Great. Thanks very much. So you can really see that we have a great spectrum. Sorry, I shouldn't use the word spectrum. A great selection of people here on stage for taking a look at some of the issues that we're looking at. So for the first question which we had discussed in advance, which we want to use to kick off our discussion, other than basically that, what is 5G and what does it mean to me? Our first question for all of you out there, how will 5G technology change cities? What do cities or organizations gain by being first adopters? So over to you, Sue.
I always get the hard ones first.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I always get the hard ones first. So certainly, I think I tie 5G to smart cities and IoT. So IoT, Internet of Things, where everything is a sensor and you're gathering gobs and gobs of data or lots and lots of data. And this is why you need AI to be able to go through all that data. And the sensors are collecting all sorts of information from a public safety perspective and security. Some of the things that are sensors are, for example, cameras in the United States. If you can believe it, I looked at this research before I did some media stuff. 30 million cameras deployed that are collecting something like 4 billion hours of video a week, right? So pretty much wherever you go in the United States, you're recorded. And so one of the questions that comes up with that is, what are they doing with this? So from the public safety and security perspective, you really want to be able to not have the kinds of really nasty terrorist events that we've had, or situations where there's active shooters and things like that. So that should be helpful. But, because there's, this is controversial here, apologies, but there's no change in the law. You can still carry a gun in the United States, but they're installing a lot of cameras. So I'm not sure if that tells you very much, but for me, in terms of smart cities, you're collecting a lot of data, you're using that data to really, really try and reduce the danger for people individually. There are other applications in healthcare in terms of remote surgeries and remote medicine, which I think will be really useful as well. So that's really two of the areas that I'm excited about.
Okay. So Rodney, same question over to you. How will 5G technology change cities? What do cities or organizations gain by being first adopters?
Off the bat, I really don't know. I recently visited the Surrey Traffic Centre. It's in Coquitlam. I think there was about 15 cameras in Vancouver. There's about 400 cameras in Surrey. It's just a difference where at the traffic lights, it's become cheaper to put up a camera. Cameras are incredibly cheap now. Really good video is very, very cheap. So now it's become easier instead of putting the coils under the ground to detect whether a car has arrived, you have cameras. So they've got about 400 feeds of video coming in, and that's a fair bit of data. And it's all annotated. Have you ever seen these maps where you see the cars going along the road and how fast they're shifting and so on? How do they measure it? Well, quite often they have a little box at the side of the road, and it just sniffs your phone as it goes past. It knows its address, and it picks it up somewhere else, calculates the velocity, so it knows the speeds. So your device is being used for probably money making. Nice of you. At the end of the day, this is kind of invisible to most people, a lot of this stuff. But smart cities, I look at the limitations of cities, right? How do I get from A to B really quickly? Well, you can't in Vancouver. The traffic's terrible, right? So how do you get around that? Well, you have to probably have less cars, or else you shift them a lot more efficiently. And I think we're coming to an age where we will be able to actually shift the traffic much, much more efficiently. And that would be one feature of a smart city that I would look for. Another feature, something that just gets on my wick, is the amount of noise in a downtown city. If you're in an apartment or something like that, the amount of noise is incredible sometimes. The rubbish trucks, the trash trucks, those guys just love crashing these big bins, they just love it. It's a drum. So I'd just like to see this kind of fixed. And there's a certain visionary that I've worked with in the last several years who wanted to make a smart window. He said, can we make a smart window that goes into an apartment? And it just cancels the sound as it comes through. The answer is maybe. It's pretty hard. I've tried for a while to work on this. We've made quite a bit of progress, but it's a hard problem. Of course it is. If it was an easy problem, it would have been solved a long time ago. So that kind of thing, and this is using tricks that we would use for radio waves, where we cancel waves with each other. We add one wave to another one and we get zero. It's a mind-blowing concept. Where does the energy go? Things like this. So we use this because every system has a lot of antennas now. Base stations have a lot of antennas. Your cell phone probably has 10 or 20 antennas. The new 5G cell phones, and I saw one just the other night, it had 60 gigahertz, for those that know what that means in it. It had 28 gigahertz, whole bunches or arrays of antennas in these. It had about 50 antennas in it. There's a lot of antennas around. Every new car has about 20 to 30 antennas, depending on the model. It's all doing something. So it's really interesting what's going on with the information. But you're right, 5G is going to bring us a colossal amount of data. What we do with it, I don't know. Google's seen everything I've ever typed in my whole life onto a keyboard. One day they're going to figure out they can make money out of me with that information, but I don't think they have yet, or maybe they have, but I just don't know. Yeah, so those are my sort of knee-jerk reactions to what a smart city is. Some of the things that I would like to see changed. When I came here tonight, I was asking Siri, where is the Seagull Centre and the Harbour Centre of SFU? Siri had no idea. Just couldn't find it. I finally had to stop the car and type it in just to see it. I was curious. I knew where it was, but I was curious to see how a machine would work. Wouldn't it be nice if Siri was 100 times smarter, or Hey Google, or whoever's there at the other end, that artificial intelligence, if that worked better, we would use it more. It's not very good yet. It's going to get better really quickly in the next few years, and after that, the consequences are quite unpredictable. We've seen some of the downsides. We've seen Boeing with their AI and their planes. Okay, there's been a mismatch here about how to use that AI. Did the pilots get trained well enough, or was the plane just a turkey? Did it just take off on things?
Or were they bad engineers?
Yeah,
Right?
we don't know.
Testing that they should have done.
Or were they good engineers and told not to do anything because it was costing
See,
them?
I wouldn't blame AI. It's like bad engineering and bad testing.
Sure, yeah. So these things are very unpredictable. The Boeing guys, they're just superb, but they couldn't predict what would happen. Or else, if they could, they weren't allowed to say, perhaps. But there's a lot of these issues that we just can't predict very well. That's my comment on smart cities. I've got off an aircraft already, so I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, Stefan.
All right. So before I tell you the question, how will 5G change cities? Let me tell you what 5G is, right? A little bit. So your phone today uses LTE or 4G, right? And that's the wireless link from your phone to the closest fiber, or the fiber of the network provider you're attached to, right? So if you're using TELUS, it's going to a TELUS base station, and then it goes to a fiber, and that's how it can route your calls very quickly. So 5G will provide you a faster pipe to the same fiber, right? It's not going to change everything else. So a lot of examples that you heard already happen in the network behind the wireless link that is 4G today, that will be 5G tomorrow. So 5G will provide that wireless segment with a faster speed and potentially lower latency for some applications. Some of those low latency applications could be used in smart cities. Like, for example, you could have a gunshot happening on the street. And on the street, if your city is equipped with the proper technology, it could instruct all of the video feeds to turn towards where the gunshot came from and really start recording it with better accuracy what's happening, and feed that data to police cars, etc., coming to the scene using 5G because of fast pipes and very low latency. Otherwise, everything that a typical city really needs to do today can be done with 4G and fiber to the poles, right? So lots of cities have internet cabling already to their lampposts, or fiber in some areas. So all the stuff that the cities needs to do is to get you to a fiber as fast as possible, to get you off the wireless waves that are limited in frequency and usage, right? We talked about that earlier. So why would cities want to enable 5Gs in their cities the fastest today? Well, I happen to be, I was just invited in the last few weeks to be on the Smart City Advisory Board for the City of Ottawa. I've been working with them for the past few years. We're also working with them on the Autonomous Vehicle Infrastructure Network, the Avon site in Ottawa, where we're instrumenting an autonomous vehicle track and trying to learn what's happening with these autonomous vehicles. So we have a fairly good idea what's happening and the possibilities there. And the reasons why the City of Ottawa wants to enable 5G is to attract SMEs to come to Ottawa to innovate with their peers, and have a bigger infrastructure, bigger test beds, a bigger crowd working together towards Canadian solutions that we can export around the world, right? So that's what they gain by being first adopters, is to bring innovation in and keep IP in Canada that we can then export and turn startups into success, like Sue was talking about earlier. So to me, that's why I'm excited about being involved in 5G in Ottawa, is to bring investments in Ottawa, bring engineers in Ottawa, immigration coming to Ottawa to come and work with us. Like, we need lots of talents. We have a shortage in talents in Canada, but if the city innovates, people will come and they'll set up shop, around us.
And just to support his point in terms of jobs, we've talked about this. There's about 250,000 tech jobs that are unfilled at the moment. And with respect to 5G, the prediction is that there's going to be another 50,000 jobs. And depending on how fast they deploy it, it's 70,000. So almost doubles the number. So there is a really good reason to actually try and be first in these kind of races. And I agree with Stéphane in terms of the economic impact. I think it could be big.
And you all raised an interesting aspect of this, in terms of the talent piece and the people piece, because so often we've been hearing about the whole aspect of, why people are concerned about like AI taking their jobs away and things like that. And in previous sessions, and we've discussed about the opportunities for growth relating to new technologies, migration towards different technology and different solutions. So maybe just even a bit in terms of that, since you started talking about the opportunity for people and talent, like how do you see, because how it affects cities and organizations, it affects, definitely it's going to affect the people in there. So how is this affecting the kind of things for people, whether it be like career changes or changes, the kind of work that they do on a day-to-day basis?
Well, certainly in Canada, we're sort of a country of SMEs, where 99% of our businesses in this country are a small, medium enterprise, which the government defines as less than 500. And then there's breakdowns in terms of micro, which are 1 or 2 person companies versus 5 to 10 and so on. I don't know those off by heart, but I'm sure Stats Canada, just go to their website and take a look. So from my perspective, I think we are getting into more and more requirements for a workforce that is tech ready, tech savvy. There's a lot of people spending time to try and train coders and to try and retrain people so that they can actually develop technology and more software. So, and I've always, as a woman in tech, I've always encouraged my gender to go to tech, even though they think this is a really geeky profession. And one of the reasons I do that is because it's a great profession in that I've never had to worry about not being employed. And as long as you keep innovating, you always will move forward, whether you're a man or a woman or anything. And from that perspective, I think there's tremendous opportunities also for entrepreneurship and starting small businesses. It's really, the limit is the imagination in terms of where you can go with technology, in my opinion.
And that aspect of like the training and one thing that comes to mind in terms of the research and rather than just the training, like Rodney.
And co-ops, right?
Yes.
So one of the things we talked about at SFU today is the importance of having co-op degrees in the university at all times, like Waterloo, for example. And my son's here, and he's a Waterloo grad, only has co-op programs. Yeah. And so every single discipline, they go through co-op programs, so they come out with 2 years of experience already, so employers are more likely to hire them. Yeah. And that is, I think, another reason to encourage more and more young people to go into the fields.
Yeah. And in terms of that, like there's the aspects of training, whether like be your major degree, your minor, and the aspects of it, and also, but the advances in coming up with new companies, coming up with new innovations, new technologies. Rodney, the thing I was leading at from my notes here, from following from this, so where we've heard already, like we know there are some, I'm going to be going to a question with Stéphane on this also, given that we're such a vast country and things like that, but in terms of some of the challenges we've had with these new technologies. But from the actual signal point of view and the things that people are doing from the research, how is Canada situated in terms of addressing some of these challenges in terms of like everything from the low-level engineering to behind the scenes?
I think it's pretty good. I think in BC we're actually short of engineering schools, actually, in terms of the numbers compared with other provinces and places in Canada. The per capita number of engineering teachers or schools here is very low. We'll probably do a whole new one. Whether we could populate it's another one, because often people, they head for California, they head for, you know, one of the University of California places or MIT. You know, these are the sort of the very, very top places in the world, and you can't really compete with them, to tell the truth. It's almost impossible. If we could come up for a way to compete with them, we would have done that by now. It's very, very hard, but it goes back, like, you've got to have a 100-year-old reputation and things like that. That really helps. The endowments come in, and big endowments, and so on. In terms of training, we often ask ourselves the question, what should we train our students for? You know, should we teach them coding? Should we teach them AI? Should we teach them whatever the word du jour is, you know? We don't know, because we don't know where it's heading in the future. So at least in engineering, we try to put the fundamentals into place and keep our fingers crossed that if you've got the fundamentals, which are very hard to learn, then you can probably adapt later in life to a changing world, because you've got the tools to cope with a changing world. Without the fundamentals, you're always struggling. So that's what I think. We always sort of step back to that one on the education side. Let's try and just get the fundamentals into place. Yeah. And they're kind of nice. They don't change over 50 or 100 years.
Yeah.
I have to also add that you have amazing universities like UBC, SFU. You've got amazing universities in this province. So I don't think like in Canada, we tend to suffer from this, you know, the neighbors are always better than us, right? The Americans are always better than us. MIT is always better than us. Stanford's always better than us. But I think we've had incredible scientists and engineers and Nobel Prize winners from this country, from our universities. So I wouldn't say that we can't catch up and we can't cope and we can't be with them. And I think we need to really believe that we can. As a matter of fact, I also think that I agree with you with the fundamentals, but it's very also important to teach people these other things, that AI is going to be around forever, coding is going to be around forever. So all these things communications is around forever. So this is all stuff, even though it's topic du jour, it's actually really important for their futures as well. So sorry to disagree with you a little bit, but that's my view.
I'm going to just to wrap up this first question, I'm going to turn things over to Stéphane to follow up on a point that he made, and which, and in terms of like hitting the critical. This ties into the expertise in hitting the critical mass, and with like what has been happening in Ottawa. We have a long history in Ottawa of a strong tech community there. We have strong tech communities in a range of places across Canada, which is our strength, and our weakness is that we're a vast country and tied across Canada. I guess part of the thing is specific to smart cities and 5G, because one thing that's interesting about Canada, we have this critical mass, but all of our cities are relatively small compared to many cities in the world. And we have them being very distributed. So in the context, perhaps, of our Canadian cities, and that, I'm just curious, Stéphane, some of the things that, from your perspective, things that are being looked at in Ottawa, there is a way of, you've hit the critical mass in Ottawa. How does this tie in? Does this mean because of greater connectivity, are we going to have more people wanting to move to Kelowna because it has better wine or something like that for startup companies or something like that? Or because, you know, they want to go surfing on the Arctic Ocean, moving to the further north. So anything about us being a vast country and this notion of expertise, anything that you can comment on in terms of that with the new technologies?
That's a very wide question.
Yeah.
Let me just comment on one thing. So the city of Ottawa, I mean, in Ontario, we have amalgamated cities, and they became super vast. So Ottawa spans from all the way to eastern Ontario. I forget the name of that small town anyway, all the way to Arnprior almost, and down to the 401 for those of you that know how to get to Toronto. So Ottawa is actually mostly rural. It's got a big downtown core, so we're about 1 million people downtown Ottawa, but 90% of the area of Ottawa is rural country. So the mayor and the smart city team are actually quite worried about how do we connect everyone almost like equally, but that's impossible, right? Because the wireless service providers will deploy really good wireless networks where there's most of the population, right? So in the rural areas of Ottawa, we are helping the city of Ottawa, for example, understand where their citizens are well served and less well served. CRTC has good data on that, et cetera. We have slightly better data that we're trying to mine and all this stuff. So that's the challenge of cities. Like, you don't have to go very far, and you're still in Ottawa, and you have almost no internet connection, or 5.1 for those of you that knows what it means, 5 meg download, 1 meg upload. But the Canadian government would like everybody in the country to have 50-10, 50 meg download, 10 meg upload, right? So that's a program called Connecting Canadians. So when they talk about that program, they often refer to the Northern Territories and up north and up north and up north, but you don't have to go very far outside of Vancouver to have very poor coverage, I'm sure. Same thing in Ottawa. So how do we resolve it? It's going to take years. There's programs like Connecting Canadian trying to do this. And I was talking to someone in one of the top 3 wireless service providers in the last few weeks about this. And he's an engineer, management engineers, and he said, we have a tag-along program where we tag along the technician that goes and connects those families that have had no internet and that suddenly have a service of 25.5 or 50.10 from a wireless, delivered wirelessly to their home. And then inside the home, they can now have a Wi-Fi router and have internet. It's a little bit like the old days when your grandparents didn't have electricity and they lived in the country. And then all of a sudden, hydro ran the cable all the way to their house, and now they had electricity like everyone else. So those companies that are completely disconnected, that now have connections and they have kids and they have homework on this, it's a relief for them. So he's like, that was so like eye-opening, right? So most of you probably have a pretty good internet service at home because you know this was happening tonight. But people that don't have wireless connection don't know that this is happening. They won't be able to tweet from their house anyway. Anyway, so these programs are interesting. It's not 5G, but you know, like in the city of Ottawa, there are residents that don't have wireless at all or internet at home. So we're trying to help the city with those kinds of things as well, right?
Yeah, and that's a really good point to point out is cities now in terms of it is amalgamation, and like I was recently visiting Edmonton, and the amount of rural land now within the city limits of Edmonton is it's dramatic how much that has changed with the expansion. And speaking personally, I have to say that visiting rural Alberta, the 5.1 that I got was better than the 0.0 2 years before that. So it's definitely an improvement. So to move things along here, I want to go to the second prepared question, and yes, we'll be getting to questions from the audience shortly. Second one we had was, how does 5G affect ordinary people as they move through and interact in a city or expanded city? And I guess we already started talking about this a bit more. In the context of some, Sue, would you like to add anything more to what you've been hearing so far and the notion of affecting ordinary people?
Right. So I actually wanted to, I wanted to go back to Stéphane's point for 1 second, because I still think it's very interesting when you compare, let's say, Vancouver and Ottawa, and this question of what is it? Is there something in the water? Is it, are we growing people with certain seeds or what? So I think there's a history. So it's really is historical. And I have to say, a lot of people that were in the telecommunications industry in Ottawa do move to Vancouver, right? So we have some examples here today. And so I think what happens is that there's a very strong history of anchor companies in Ottawa that have actually grown a lot of tech and a lot of telecoms. And that's really where, so now we're continuing with the smart city stuff. With respect to ordinary citizens and 5G, I think, well, obviously, if 5G does come to Vancouver widely and broadly, the ordinary citizen will all of a sudden, their devices will be faster, they'll be able to do things more on the networks and so on. And in my opinion, and if I got my wish, is that they should be safer and tended to faster by first responders, so by police or EMS if they need it, if they drop from a heart attack or something like that, heavens forbid, then the ambulance should get there faster. They should have more situational awareness in terms of knowing what's occurred in that area, or even if it's a shooting, they'll know the kinds of guns, they'll know who carried these weapons. They've added, of course, facial recognition to a lot of these cameras. So although they're not 100% accurate, so there's a huge controversy going on in Detroit right now with respect to facial recognition software because it's racist. So, you know, from that perspective, you have to be careful how you adopt some of these technologies. But in the long run, you should be able to have a better response time with respect to these technologies, in my opinion.
Rodney, you want to carry anything to add about for ordinary people as they move through and interact in a city?
Moving through a city, yeah. It would be good to press a button and just be somewhere else, right? Teleportation. Don't get stuck somewhere in between in the traffic and public transport or something like that. If you try to come to the city an hour or so before a Canucks game downtown, forget it. It takes 2 hours to get, 20 kilometres. It's just too much traffic. So I think that would be one knee-jerk reaction that you want to get from A to B really quickly. 5G will put them together into place, really fast communications. Of course, you will pay for it. Your cell phone bills. Well, someone's got to fund the stuff. It's you guys.
Well, the carriers will charge you more.
Yeah, the carriers will charge you more, so you're paying for it. So, sorry?
We don't want it.
Yeah. As long as you got the choice for, something slower. I'm finding with my plan personally that I'm struggling to keep my low rate. I don't want to go to, unlimited amount of data. I don't need it, but I'm being forced into it, all the time. Because there's no other possibility. I think there should be a right that I want a lower rate and I want to be able to have that choice. Of course, that doesn't fund the providers, the service providers very well, so that's why they don't do it. So I think the transport side of it, as I say, I've got a bugbear about acoustical noise in cities. I think that would be nice to work on. We're talking about shooters a lot. It's a bit unnerving. Yeah.
What is it?
Your shooters. You're talking about shooters a lot.
Shooters.
Yeah.
Sorry,
yeah,
that's the business that we're in.
Yeah.
We're trying to prevent tragedy.
Yeah.
That's what we do.
We're doing a little experimental project where we're
save
trying to detect a gunshot and get children into their little, hives. In America, they've got these little special rooms that they can go into, right? It's just sad.
The sad part is in the United States, there's an active shooter every day.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, in the business of saving lives, that's sad, but it's true.
Right. And treating the problem rather than the symptom seems to be that's where we're starting. Smart cities, I don't know. I'd love to hear from you people because I live in a kind of a narrow spectrum world. I'd love to hear from anybody what they want from a smart city because probably 5G will help enable it by this faster and bigger and better and more expensive communication system.
So the professor has given us our homework for when it's question time. So you start writing this down now, and that way you have a question. Stéphane.
So, like I said earlier, smart cities can be enabled today with 4G. You don't need 5G to enable sensors to exist in the network. 5G will bring faster response times from those sensors, etc., and perhaps faster communication with your vehicle. But if you project yourself 5 to 10 years out, maybe we'll have vertical takeoff drones and we'll avoid traffic altogether. But in a world where there's still rolling cars, there's going to be more autonomous vehicles, probably. Those autonomous vehicles will need the low latency aspects of 5G to perhaps communicate with the infrastructure or between cars to avoid collisions, etc. And to avoid collisions, you need very quick response times. But your car would know where there's free parking ahead of time, or your car would anticipate where there's going to be free parking because there's AI running out there that's predicting that from machine learning algorithms that there's a certain parking spot at Costco that will free up so that you can park close with your groceries. But an automated automated city, in the future should help citizens live better life, right? So when you talk to a smart city person, in Ottawa, their goal is to try to get you to work faster in the morning. If your commute time is 50 minutes, they'd like to bring it down to 45 minutes. So how do they do that? Well, maybe they adapt the traffic lights with the traffic patterns, and every day they learn from the previous day, etc., based on weather conditions, road conditions. The traffic light cycle should adapt to all this automatically and get you to work in a predictable amount of time, right? Et cetera, et cetera. That's what a smart city needs to do. They need to have goals to get citizens where they need to go faster. They need to make your life easier, right? They need to have goals like this. They're not going to automate cities just for the heck of it and because that's the right thing to do. They need to have goals towards what their citizens care about, and that's what you should demand of people running your cities.
And raising the issue of transportation, and for some of you may be aware, we had a panel session about a year ago on AI in transportation. Putting in the context though, like now if devices are, if there's more data available and there's faster transmission to these self-driving cars, the one thing that you and I actually had discussed was, I think it was yesterday, a bit of the Canadian issue of this. You know, like we see how well Vancouverites adapt to the first snowfall when they're driving on the road. So I would like to see that, have we data enough to train a self-driving car to adapt to drive like a Vancouverite in snow conditions, or will it drive like somebody from Ontario using your training data? Like, how do we deal with the Canadian issues, you know, in terms of the weather, which is an extreme, not only in Canada, different kinds of weather are extreme elsewhere in the world.
So one of the only things that the new, well, I don't think it's a new government anymore, but the Doug Ford government did not cut, and we were talking about this earlier today, is actually cold weather research with automated vehicles. So they're actually throwing money at that and cutting a lot of other stuff, like things they shouldn't be cutting. And so their view is that because Ontario gets so cold, they want to develop some sort of world-class capabilities in cold weather automated vehicles, and so they've thrown actually quite a bit of money at that to get sort of SMEs and universities and colleges to work together and engage on coming up with new technologies in that area.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, so as announcements, and so Stéphane, specifically to the 5G aspect, do you think from what you're aware of that, would the big barrier for any of these things be like that the technology is not in the vehicles yet, or would take a long time to roll out, you know, or a matter of speaking, to roll out to be able to adapt to some of the new technologies? Are there things that are dependent on it being the high speed of 5G?
Well, lots of companies actually believe that their vehicles should be completely self-aware or self-driven
Like
without the
kind of
infrastructure.
thing, yeah.
And there's a school of belief that believes the infrastructure needs to help, or there needs to be vehicle-to-vehicle communication. But if you ask the Teslas of this world, they believe that they need to be autonomously be able to completely avoid collisions on their own with sensors, LiDAR technologies, radar technologies, etc. It's on themselves to do it without external interaction, because they don't believe the latency can be short enough to avoid an accident, for example, right? But there's a lot of people that believe that this is utopic, and you need to talk to the infrastructure, you need to communicate between vehicles. So there's two camps, beta, VHS, right? So who's going to win? I don't know.
The DVDs, yeah.
Right? So who knows?
Rodney, do you want to add anything on that?
No, I don't think I do.
Yeah. So, in terms of that. Okay, so I want to move to the last prepared question. So we thought we'd save something really tame for the end. So it was the shortest question. Does privacy still exist in a 5G world? That's not loaded at all, is it?
I was going to say that I don't think privacy exists in a 4G world. Mm-hmm. I think that we've already blown that out of the water, and I don't think we'd have to blame 5G for that. Certainly, I was talking about this earlier today. So I have an unlisted phone number, and nobody's really supposed to know where I live. Yet you can't sleuth this out on the internet now. And I don't know how the hell they got this information, besides, you know, maybe harvesting some of the databases from some of the service providers, whether it's Air Canada, or whether it's Google, or whether it's my iPhone, you know, because my iPhone has my mobile number on it, but it doesn't have my home number, but it's associated with my business. So who knows? But from that perspective, I think that we get a huge failing grade We've got really good PIPEDL legislation in this country, but the service providers and whoever is harvesting this data is completely violating people's privacies already. And so as we go to 5G, I think we should be looking back at how can we, if we can ever get control over this again. So short of moving and changing your phone number every, I don't know, every few weeks, I really don't know how you're going to maintain privacy. Or, throwing out your phone, but it's too late because that information is already on the net. I have to move, right?
So in terms of that, and Rodney, since you're the engineer in the crowd, I'm also going to allow you to do it from a signal processing point of view, like in terms of that, because people are always worried, well, what are people listening in on with what kind of antenna or rabbit ears and stuff like that?
You can listen into most things. I guess if you like that stuff. I think everybody is probably in the audience is familiar with just Google and just stalking somebody, finding out what you can about some individual. Take their name, take their address, find their phone number, just try it. You'll be amazed how much you can find with just Google. So what's going on behind the, under the hood? Oh boy, these guys know a lot more than what you can find out with their algorithms. When there's more data flying around, and there will be, of course, with 5G, that's the whole idea of it, there'll be more information about you. I don't know how to avoid this. You can try and stay off the web. It fails, right? That's been your experience.
And I use DuckDuckGo, right? They shouldn't be tracking me, but hey, it's all out there.
So if it's really confidential to you, just don't say it over the telephone. Simple as that,
The internet.
Yeah, just stay offline. I don't know how to, and that even won't fix it, but there's privacy and privacy. A lot of privacy things don't worry me too much. I don't mind if Google or Amazon or whatever, they can look at my purchases, they can look at where I go, they can watch my typing patterns, they can tell a lot about my family and who I talk to and connected to and so on. They can probably see that I need a typing lesson. I'm very bad on and things like that. There's a lot of things I don't mind. Sure, they can have it. I don't really have too many secrets like that, but I can see if you're sensitive to the privacy, there's a serious problem with us now, and it will get worse.
Stéphane.
So everything that we talked about so far has really nothing to do with 4G or 5G. It's all about the internet, right? So Google is on the internet. Most of us, very often we access Google when we're at home over Wi-Fi. It's got nothing to do with your 4G phone. So when I travel, I never use free Wi-Fi. So how many of you here like to use free Wi-Fi at Starbucks or McDonald's or whatever? Raise your hand. Well, on free Wi-Fi, there's really bad people that can sniff everything that you do on free Wi-Fi. And trust me, because it's easy to do. We don't do it, but we know how easy it is. So please never look at your bank account on free Wi-Fi or type in any password to any website whatsoever on free Wi-Fi. If you use LTE, it's a private, secure, encrypted transaction that your carrier is carrying for you. That's secure. So if you have to look at your bank account, turn off Wi-Fi, turn off Bluetooth, and do it. So while I've been in Vancouver, my Wi-Fi and my Bluetooth has been off. Okay, so I work in that field. Trust me on this. So there's a lot of things you can turn off on your phone. So for each application, you can tell the applications that you don't want to be GPS tracked while you're using the application. You don't want data in the background to be sent to them. All of these things you can turn off and control your own privacy settings on your phone. So if you don't know how it works, there's lots of people out there that do YouTube videos that can walk you through how to do this.
And there's someone somewhere with a file on you saying, this guy doesn't want to be tracked on GPS.
He's a little paranoid, but seriously, you can turn off all of these settings. I have 2 kids, a 9 and a 10-year-old, and Apple now has enabled me to completely track which application they can use and they can't use, and if they can share data or not while they're using their applications, etc. So there's lots and lots of controls. You can control your privacy. So between 4G and 5G, it's not going to change the privacy posture. It's all about what you decide to give the internet. If you have a Facebook account, I have a Facebook account. I have a big family. I share stuff. I come from a town that's 4 hours drive away. So if I want my family to know what my kids are doing, I have to put it on Facebook. So, but it's such a, it's a beautiful application, but it's free, right? So how do they manage to provide it for free? Because they're collecting your data, right? So if it's too good to be true, it's because it's too good to be true, right? So you have to be aware of what you're doing and why you're doing it. And I'm not speaking on behalf of the government here, just a dad, you know, with 2 kids. I put their pictures on Facebook. I don't care. You know, there's hundreds of thousands of pictures of kids on Facebook. You know, nothing's going to happen to them.
I'll add something to that. My son is also of a different generation to me, of course, but in that generation, and there is this popular expression, if it's free, you're the product. Okay, so Facebook, searching on Google, yeah, so just think about that next time you use something that's free. You're the product.
Any other things to chime in on that before we turn it over to the audience for questions there? Okay, so this is a fun time that we're moving. So but in order to do this, I need a prime number. Pick me a number between 1 and 5.
4.
4. So anybody in the 4th row, anywhere along here with a question? In the 4th row. 4th row. There's somebody in the 4th row, yes. We'll get a microphone out to you there.
Just in regards to privacy, maybe you guys can speak to the lack of regulation regarding online privacy and the issue of corporations beginning to profile and make decisions, business decisions, on whether to provide products or services based upon your profile. So in other words, if you are seen as a financial risk to borrowing, how would that impact your ability to service or to secure a mortgage? Or if you are seen as someone who is looking at some sort of diabetes medication, how would that impact your ability to, or your risk for a potential employer that would like to hire you? So at what point is the profiling going to reach a critical mass where employers, governments, companies are able to make business decisions based upon your profile?
Yeah, that's a good question. That was actually, we should direct you also to our Data and Democracy series that we had, because those were a lot of the questions that people were looking at there. But particularly in the sense of, because with smart cities, there's going to be more data available to you through companies, through organizations. So anybody prefer to answer that one first? Or we'll go with...
So the only thing I can tell you that from our own experience, you know, as a small business, right? So when people do apply for jobs in our company, we do go look at Facebook. We do go look at their public profiles, if you will, right? So we're not looking at their private profiles, but if they, you know, are posting drunken party, I don't know, vomiting in frats or whatever, we're not likely to hire them. So one of the things that I always advise a lot of people related to me or people that are young people coming through things is just don't post this stuff in social media. If you really want to get a serious job at the end of it all, you probably shouldn't be posting things like that. As far as violating your privacy and looking at health records and your searches on whether it's diabetes or other medicines like that, that's just vile, really. It's terrible that I can imagine a draconian behavior like that. So unfortunately, the technology can do that. But I honestly think that you should be protected from that through the Privacy Act. But it has to be tested in courts, unfortunately.
I agree with you. The lack of regulation in this area really concerns me. Everybody has a health problem probably, and it ranges from depression to some chronic disease. And if you're running a little insurance company or you're an insurance broker or something like that, you want to know the risks. You owe it to your company, the shareholder and all that sort of stuff, to find out, is this person a risk or not? And it's not the privacy, they'll find out, but it's how you regulate it. I don't know. In America, a lot of chronic illnesses, they're not covered. So people try to cover up the fact that they've got chronic illness, and then their medical insurance will pay for it. Their employer or whoever will pay for their medical insurance. But if they've got a liability there, they're at a disadvantage for getting those positions. And that goes across the board to lending, mortgages and all that sort of thing. I don't have an answer to your question, but it's a real concern. Keep asking these questions of everybody around you. Just try and raise the awareness.
Stefan, do you want to add anything? I know it's not a specific 4G question. But
Well, I'm not a privacy expert in what's in and what's not in the Privacy Act of the country. But again, I mean, my friends and my brother even has a company. And once on Facebook, he expressed views on municipal, who he would vote for or something. And I said, hey, buddy, like you have a company in your town, right? So you should really not put that kind of stuff on your Facebook feed. Like you should go and delete it, in fact, because your best customer might be someone that will vote for the other guy, and you'll damage your reputation. Like it's not worth it, right? So very often, I don't put a lot of stuff, editorial comments, I call them, on those social medias. Is it really worth it? Like who's really listening? You have to ask yourself that when you do stuff like that. So anyway, general statement of what I do and what I don't do, but on the privacy front, it's a really good question. Companies should not be allowed to do this, and I don't know if they are allowed or not, or are able to. I don't know what Google will sell to you or not. I've never tested it, right? So, good question.
Okay, so just so that I know there's going to be, I saw a lot of people having questions here. So anybody that has a question, raise your hands. I'm going to assign some numbers. Yeah, I knew it. So I'm going to start first from this side, since we started with the first question there. So you are going to be number 1. In this section, you are going to be number 2. This section, you are number 3. And this section, we had somebody from, so that section, number 4. So who was number 1?
Yo, hi.
And if you just keep it to I want to get through as many people as possible, so just make sure that it's
That's
a
good?
short
Okay,
question
great.
and with as little preamble as possible, just for the question.
I'll try to do that.
Yeah.
I'm an independent science writer. I'm from Ottawa, Stéphane, so I know Ottawa very well, and I used to work in politics. But in any case, I have one concern, and there's a bit of an area that we haven't addressed this evening, and it's the health effects. I know what the current standards are in terms of Safety Code 6 and all that stuff, but acquainted with the science as I am, I'm aware that there's some serious issues, specifically with 5G, 4G as well, but and we haven't addressed any of those, and there's a bit of a silo around this, and it's unfortunate we don't have someone on the panel that would reflect that. Some of the people here tonight are probably aware of some of these issues as well, and that's always good. So my concern is, I'll give you just one thing. This is a study, there are many. This is a study that came out in Environmental Research in November 2018, and the author is Anthony Miller et al. And Anthony Miller is an epidemiologist at the University of Toronto. He was on the original IARC committee, which is the International Agency for Research on Cancer. And that was the standard that was set for risks in relation to wireless technology, and this was back in 2011. And their standard is that we have the technology today is rated as a class 2B carcinogen, group 2B, which means a possible carcinogen. Mm-hmm. The newspaper from 2018, they've reviewed the research now up to date, and they said now it's a class 1. They wanted to have a group class 1, which means it's not a probable, it is a carcinogen, period. So this is going to unleash a real flurry of legal challenges in the United States, which are usually ahead of us on this question, litigious. And even Aaron Brockovich's firm is now looking into this. So anyway, I'm just setting it out. I know there's other technologies out there, Stefan, like Li-Fi, and it could be addressing still give us the technology thing that we want in terms of low latency, high output, high return. But we're not leapfrogging into that zone. We're looking at 5G, which is, I think it's going to be a dead duck before it gets out of the gate. Anyway, that's it.
Yeah, so in terms of the health effects of 5G, in terms of that, so anybody like to respond first, or all of them?
Sure,
Rodney,
I can talk about a bit the radio wave effects. In the very early days, there was a thing called a Motorola brick, the sort of first cell phone. And it had a very clever design mechanism.
I was a baby when that happened, just so you know.
Rub it in.
Right?
So it had quite a clever design mechanism where the big antenna on the top, remember the days when the antenna was explicit? They were the days. The way they'd positioned that antenna, it drove a lot of power into the brain. And the idea was to fill in the shadow area behind the head. And these were 8-watt phones. These were massively powerful phones. These were probably really bad for you. You're not allowed much more than 0.2 watts now, even less. So every time you put a phone next to your head, there's half the power's going somewhere that's not radiating. It's going into your head. It's a notoriously hard thing to track down whether it's truly dangerous or not. And every research study I've seen on this, and I've been in some in the years gone by, the answer is always, gee, you need more research. It sounds like lawyers, right? You have to give us more money. So coming down with a definitive answer if it's bad or not. I mean, there's been a lot of studies done on rats and things like that. And sometimes it improves the carcinogen, it improves the outcome by killing off cancers. And I worked in that area for a while. And other times it makes things worse. But there's nothing terribly definitive. I'm very aware that we're the first kind of generation of cell phone users. And as a New Zealander, I can tell you, if you get sunburned a lot as a child, it comes back to get you 20, 30, 40 years later. There's some biological mechanism where it remembers that it got damaged. And I don't know what's going to come of this. Certainly two things. The cell phone providers or the mobile communications providers, the manufacturers or the service providers, they won't fund research in this area. And the reason they won't is that if they funded it, they would be seen perhaps later as being aware that there may be a problem. So they don't like funding that kind of thing, but they do an awful lot of work behind the scenes. So I don't know if there's a health risk or not. I can say that, in my opinion, looking at the research and monitoring, there's nothing that definitively says it's a bad thing, but there's nothing yet that we can really claim it's safe.
Stefan, do you want to add on to that?
Well, we don't do research in Safety Code 6 at the CRC. We have a sister group in our department that does the testing of all the mobile devices that want to be sold in the country. For example, when Apple launched the very first iPhone, they forgot to do the testing in Canada. So on launch day, they were very surprised when the Canadian government said, you can't launch here because you didn't bother to test your phone. So they had to delay the launch in Canada. And we were seen as a fast follower with the iPhone because we forced them to do the testing. Just a little story here. But Health Canada in Canada is responsible for Safety Code 6. They work with our sister group, downtown Ottawa. They have in our engineering team, they work with Health Canada on the Safety Code 6. And it's different for each frequency, right? So when you say 5G, the first deployments of 5G will happen on frequencies that we're already using today with other cell phones, right? 600 meg, 700 meg, 800 meg, or 3.5 gig, right? So below 6 gig, the Safety Code 6 is pretty clear. So I think what you're referring to is, what about 28 gigahertz and 60 gigahertz and those things? And there the standard is less clearly defined, but Health Canada is working on that. But there is no devices at those frequencies right now, right? So that those frequencies are just used for fixed wireless access to your home. So there's an antenna outside your home, and then inside the house, it's propagated through an Ethernet cable.
Sue, do you want a very quick follow-up on that? Because I want to make sure we
No,
get
I'm
to the
good.
other
I think they
questions.
did a
Yeah.
great job. Thanks, guys.
Very good question. Thank you very much. Number 2 was right here, I believe. Do we have a microphone for this gentleman here? Great.
Thank you. I have a question about the economics. I'm wondering if any of you know of the connectivity industry, the people that provide you internet connection or cell phone connection. What is the scale of that economy, and what percentage is it of the national economies?
Business point of view, anybody can answer that one?
I don't have numbers, but it truly is massive. I mean, if you look at the salaries of the leading service providers, CEOs, these are massive salaries. You can draw a conclusion from that how much money they're making. It's huge, and it dominates an economy. You look at the Rogers. the service providers, just the service providers, Rogers, Bell, these kind of people, Telus. These are very wealthy companies, the wealthiest ones.
So I have a couple of data points for you, but these are global. So they're not just for Canada, but for example, the market for connected vehicles is something like $237 billion globally, and Canada gets a slice of that. The market for the emergency management and incident management stuff that we're in the public safety and security, is essentially, I think it's something like 430 billion worldwide annually. So these are massive economic generating areas. And I think the slice that you're looking for is in there. So certainly there wouldn't be this much effort on smart cities and 5G if there wasn't a huge payout at the end.
Is there anywhere a person can look to find out the scale of these numbers? And the contingent question is there any way of a nation or a population to control the profit margin in this sector?
Well, that's a difficult one because essentially, if you think about 5G, it's the carriers. The carriers are the ones that are deploying these, and these are all profit-making machines. They're not for profit sector. And so, all you have to do is go look at the annual reports for, let's say, Bell, Rogers, TELUS, Shaw, and you'll see the numbers that these guys generate annually,
Public
billions.
companies, yeah. So I raised some good economic things there, and I know our panels are not the experts in there, but I really appreciate you trying to answer them. I want to make sure we get through
I'll just
very
make
quick.
one point. I think people like you and me looking at retirement, you've got to have a big chunk of retirement money put aside for connectivity now. That's something pretty new.
Okay, so moving along to the next questions, I want to make sure we got through the people I numbered off. It was number 3, I believe it was you there. Do you have a microphone there? Yeah. Okay, so we just want to we're running short on time. I smell the food's arriving, so if you can be direct to the question.
I have a question for everybody in this room, including the three
Well,
of
we'll
you
keep it to the,
on the panel.
Yeah.
Under the guise of so-called faster internet and safety, I mean, you referenced shootings several times, are we going to trade our well-being for people's health and privacy and freedom? We are talking freedom here for technocratic
So
power.
your question is trading. Oh, so what is your direct question for the panel? Is
Yes.
trading privacy and this for?
What would you choose? Would you choose health and privacy and true freedom, or would you choose technocracy? There is a wonderful website.
Okay, we don't need. So the question. So in terms, the question. If you'd like to respond, anybody care to respond to the question? Because I'm sorry, I realize that at events, that's why we have time for discussion afterwards for the different things. So you're pleased to have discussions there. So there's the comment in terms of the aspects of freedom in terms of this. So I guess we had an earlier question in terms of the comment of you're giving up, you are the product when you're giving up these things. So I guess the question is in terms of, are we doing this all for, what is your perspective in terms of the freedoms? I think you've started to answer that. Anybody like to add more to that?
You are inevitably losing some of your freedoms, as I think you will define it, by being disconnected to the world. If you can't really even go off grid, it's almost impossible. People will find out about you somehow. So there is some loss of freedom. I watched that documentary movie the other night, Hack. I don't know if anybody's seen it. It's about the Facebook and the Cambridge Analytica. It's worth watching because the claim of the journalist at the end of it, the author's message, if you like, was we'll never have a free will election ever again. We can't. The technology is always ahead of us. So I think the answer is we don't have a choice. We are losing freedom and we have to embrace technology.
And I would just say, if you want, you have to go off grid because people, if you're on the internet, you're doing any searches, there are people tracking you. If you're using an iPhone or an Android phone, people are tracking you.
But the thing is we're going to quickly be coming to a point in society where even if you don't own a phone, you're going to walk down the street and
Yes,
you will have.
I think it's a really important point. Yeah.
And are we going to rush in and bring this 5G and stealing people's choice
Yeah. So just to sum up the question in terms of the 5G question, like we've been answering the general question of introducing new technology, and we've already established, you know, that yeah, you're losing things. Do you want to speak something specific?
Yeah, I'll just say it again. Like this got nothing to do with 5G, right? So there's cameras today that are wired without wireless links, right? So most cameras need so much bandwidth that it makes no sense to send that data over a wireless link. So that's not 4G, it's not 5G, it's just wired, right? So it's got nothing to do with 5G. Your question is a great question. Like I'm the worst. I don't really use apps. I don't use my phone at home. Like I'm the least, I'm the lowest user of technology once I get home, right? I love the work that we do at work. Well, once I get home, it's like I just want to watch the hockey game and interact with people, you know. Yeah. So, Ottawa is a hockey team in development, yeah.
Right now.
Yeah. No, I think
on my smart TV.
Yeah, that raises an interesting question and observation, which I think we've addressed, and it's a valid concern you have. And before I go on to the last person here, we have before the break, and it is the whole thing. We've seen this in all of our panels, and it's been a question that always is raised with every introduction of technology, with every new tool, every new process. You always there is a weight of what are the advantages, what are the disadvantages. Everything comes with that. And it's really important for us to have these discussions so that we do not go into it blindly and are aware, okay, why am I doing this? And if it comes down to the choice of saying that, yes, this means that I'm not going to live in a city where there's cameras, then you end up making that choice kind of thing. So thank you very much for raising that question. And there was a question number 4. Who was 4? It was question 4 there, yeah.
It was me, but it was answered because it was a question with regard to health.
Mm-hmm. So that one was covered there. So you know what? We've gone over time slightly here in terms of that. So okay, one very quick question.
You're mentioning safety code 6. When you listen to Barry Trower and Jerry Flynn, who worked with a military in Great Britain and in Canada, who basically said, Safety Code 6 was put up by a man who was a shill for the corporations and for the military. It has nothing to do with the health effects of non-thermal radiation. Yeah. It is only a thermal measure. So therefore, it's totally irrelevant to the health effects of these frequencies with which we are bombarded. Certainly, the atmosphere...
And it's unfortunate we don't have any health aspects.
We have a right not to be constantly shot. Because this is the same as being shot, bombarded with these frequencies that have horrible, because I am EMF sensitive.
Yeah. So raising a good question there. So thank you very much. And like we said, we always never have enough time for all the questions, and that's why we allocate time to have food and have further discussion here. So what I'd like to first start with is thanks everyone, all the panelists for participating today. Thank you very much. Sue, Rodney, Stéphane. We've only just started some of these discussions in terms of this, and you can see why they're with every, as I was starting to say in my summary comments, whenever there's a new technology or a new invention, there needs to be these discussions, and that's part of the thing we've been doing with the Data Visionaries series, is because we're always hearing about data being collected, data applied to a wide area of things, whether it be transportation, whether it be health, whether it be security, and so on. So it gives me a lot of excitement to be involved as scientific director of SFU's Big Data Initiative, where we're able to work with researchers, work with ordinary citizens, work with corporations, work with people. Basically, the way we describe it is, like, if you have data and you have a problem, we're the people there to start some of those discussions. And I'm really pleased that you are all able to join us tonight for the Data Visionary series. And please stay tuned for more upcoming panels and events being launched by Data Visionaries. Now, I encourage you to interact with each other and with our panelists as we all grab some snacks there. Thanks very much, everyone, for coming.